So how many times have we heard this? The pandemic changed everything. We've all heard it a million times by now, and it affects every part of our life. But one part of many families' lives that it really affected was schools. We all know how school used to work. Kids went to school. But the pandemic changed that. And for months, we've been in a debate about whether the kids go to the classroom, go to the schools, or whether they stay home. So how do we respond to this? Maybe we should move some of the classrooms outdoors. The research suggests that it's a lot safer outdoors. The question is, how much are we willing to change? How much are we willing to sacrifice in order for our kids to have the education that they deserve? That's really at the center of sustainability. Even after the pandemic is over, that question will be with us, because the decisions we make about our schools, the choices we make, and the values we hold, they're going to carry over to every other area of sustainability that we deal with.
I have a second grader and a fourth grader. I had really mixed feelings. I really struggled with the idea of sending my kids into a potentially crowded classroom with not enough space. I also took my kids for their annual checkup with their pediatrician, and I asked her, is there any substitute for peer interaction? And the pediatrician said, there really is no substitute. She also said that she had seen a lot of kids put on weight over the summer because a lot of camps were shut down. A lot of people were staying inside more. And she also told me to look out for signs of depression and eating disorders in my kids as they entered into remote learning. And that really tipped me towards thinking, you know what, I'm going to get my kids back to school as soon as I possibly can.
But as you considered in-person learning, were there still concerns you had about that?
I really started thinking about ways to mitigate risk and layer on protection. The risk is 20 times greater of COVID infection indoors than outdoors.
Wow.
We're talking about a differential of 20 times here. So to me, that says it will protect everyone, teachers, administrators, kids.
Adults are getting to the park. The kids are not. Kids are actually going out. Small kids in particular are going out less now than they did before COVID. But their parents and their big brother off to college, they're getting out a lot. And there's a lot more talk about outdoor classrooms for schools.
There's also a term called nature-based education.
Nature-based education does go farther and deeper than simply getting kids outdoors. The more green the so-called classroom is, nature in the school, but nature outside the school, the kids going out to learn about everything, not just nature, not just science, but about everything. The greener the setting was, the higher the test scores on standardized testing. Attention deficit disorder goes down, the symptoms of that go down. The cortisol levels go down, the stress hormone goes down. This is good for the teachers too. There was a study that showed that teachers who were able to get kids out learning outdoors, those teachers tended to burn out less than the teachers who were trapped in that schoolroom with the kids all day, every year, over and over.
When kids are bouncing off the walls, remove the walls.
Melissa, your school district has done a lot with outdoor space. Can you talk a little bit about how you've used outdoors?
Outdoor learning and outdoor experiences have always been a big part of our work in Mapleton. When we considered reopening our schools in light of our current situation that we're facing, it really prompted us to reimagine how we use our space to do what we need to do for our students. So we were already thinking outside of the box, but now we got to think even bigger.
We have an amphitheater, there's a math class happening in the treehouse behind us. Mm-hmm. And so we're not just looking at it from the terms of science and nature, we're looking at this is a great environment for learning in general.
Yeah, are there any topics you think really can't be taught in an outdoor setting?
Not at all.
So we've had to do things like buy dry erase boards, and we're buying chalk again. So we're using different methods to provide that same type of learning, that same quality learning with that same rigor.
We have noticed that the engagement is actually much higher.
There's so many important pieces of a child's development that come when they are learning about their world and how to be good stewards in their world in their backyard. Being able to bring such incredible visionaries to the table, I think that could make anything possible, because it's certainly what made this space a reality for us.
I've heard you have some learning gardens.
We did design our learning gardens to really help facilitate the EL curriculums. We are about 40% ELL, students that come to us speaking another language.
These learning gardens, like we see behind us here, these are the brainchild of Big Green. Can you tell us a little bit about what the idea is behind these and how they function?
Sure. Yep. The idea is that these are really forging a connection between health and education. And we want to bring students out and have them be in a place that's very interactive and that is a healthy environment for them to be learning. So that's why they grow food in these. We want the students to really see where their food comes from and want them to be empowered through that. They're consciously designed to be outdoor classrooms.
Just putting, like one seed in each hole. Yeah. It's okay.
What would I experience if I had one of these learning gardens in my school?
A lot of excitement and a lot of what I would call magic. I think sometimes as we grow older, this filter develops and we can't see the magic quite as clearly as a student can. We were at a garden with fourth graders, actually, and we had grown some kale. And a lot of these students, when they first came out to the garden, had never even seen kale growing in a garden. One of the students stopped me and just said, that was the most amazing experience I've had tasting food ever. CU Denver, we're able to find that students were 97% more likely to try fruits and vegetables after having a garden.
97%?
Yes, because they were so much more excited when they saw it growing the garden, and that vegetables didn't have to be this scary thing, and that they were empowered to try these new things.
How has the pandemic affected Big Green, either for better or worse, or maybe for both?
Obviously, the worst is that we can't work with students outside right now. As much as we would in the past. But on the other side of that, it has pushed us years into the future to really quickly develop our virtual supports. So any school across the nation can go to Big Green at Home and have this off-the-shelf curriculum.
Right, and so your programming is available even for children who don't have a yard, who may live just in an apartment.
Yes, exactly. At the moment, most of the time we are putting these in urban areas. So in large school districts like Chicago Public Schools, Denver Public Schools, LAUSD.
So we don't have a lot of outdoor space here because we're in a very urban setting. Academy 360 is a health and wellness elementary school. We serve ECE to 5th grade, and we, along with academics, put a lot of focus on social and emotional learning and physical wellness. COVID kind of presented us with a challenge as far as bringing students back in person, and so we started taking pictures of the area and coming up with some ideas, and then we submitted our proposal and we were given a grant to get the materials. So the plan as of now is to have 4 outdoor classroom spaces and then create a schedule so that teachers can take their students outside and use those spaces. We're hoping that this would be an example that outdoor education can happen anywhere. As long as weather permits, I will be out here as much as possible. We are not a traditional school building, and so we do not have a gymnasium inside. And so our students are already pretty used to coming with jackets and hats and ready for the weather because they are outside a lot of the day already.
There's a saying, there's no bad weather, just wrong clothes. As a kid, who didn't like playing in the snow?
What was really exciting about this learning park in February, the Bird Conservancy came out and worked with the teachers here at this school. It was very sunny, it was very warm, but there was a foot of snow on the ground. And the trainer said, get your boots and your coat.
And the things that teachers were able to see, I think opened their eyes to this can be used year-round.
Because one of the things you can see in the snow are tracks.
That's
right?
exactly what we did.
Right.
We looked at tracks.
You can teach essentially zoology to the kids.
And our habitat. What is going on around us?
Right.
What is happening when we're not at school that we don't see?
I think though about all the ways that Coloradans and really people all over the world make the outdoors not just comfortable, but even fun. Curriculums may have to change to facilitate that, there's no question. And I'm not sure that outdoor learning is the solution for all cases, all students. For some kids, it's just not possible. Maybe they have allergies, maybe they have other factors where outdoor education just isn't going to work for them. But for every kid that will benefit from it, that frees up space indoors for those kids who need that space, who need to be there. And I think it can really work for everyone.
Some have even suggested that maybe we should move our classrooms out onto the street, have pop-up tents out there, close the street. What do you think about that? If your kids were actually in those kind of classrooms?
Street space is public space, and nobody benefits more from public space than our city's children. Much of the public believe the streets are for cars and for motorized vehicles only. And this conversation frequently revolves around taxes. The reason that those taxes are collected is because vehicles do a lot of damage to the streets and the roads. Little kids playing on the asphalt, it's not going to cause a lot of wear and tear. So I think it's a win for everyone. I think it's a win for the city, for safety, for risk management, and for our children's future.
Have you discussed this with your kids, and how do they feel about this?
I sure have. There was a letter to the mayor about making this option available to schools. And I asked my second grader if she would like to sign it because she is a student of DPS schools. She gave me an enthusiastic yes. It's amazing what happens when children feel empowered and engaged with their neighborhood on all of the avenues, literally and figuratively, that are available there.
There's absolutely a place for it in all neighborhoods. Granted, that park may not be usable. Granted, there's not a lot of it. That's one of the reasons why I really think kind of the next stage of environmentalism has to recognize that conservation is not enough. Now we need to create nature. We need to create it in our cities. We need to create it in every kind of neighborhood. It is true that the distribution of parks and open space is terribly inequitable. And this is a civil rights issue. The people who grow up, the kids growing up in neighborhoods with very little nature, die earlier. I mean, this is a life and death issue. This is why I think that this needs to be considered a human right. Until we think of this as a human right, it'll be patronized. It'll be said that, well, that's a nice to have. No, it's not. It's a have to have. It's a matter of life and death.
We have a national vision that everyone in the country would live within a 10-minute walk of home of a high-quality park.
And a park can be anything from big to small, even a pocket park.
Absolutely. Here in Colorado, we're working on pocket parks in Denver's Westwood neighborhood, and then working on everything all the way up to state parks, such as Fisher's Peak State Park down near Trinidad. So literally from less than an acre to almost 20,000 acres.
The Trust for Public Lands recently came out with a new report entitled Schools Out. Can you tell us a little bit more about that report?
Yeah, so the idea behind that report is to use this time that we're in right now to help us rethink more holistically the roles that schoolyards can play for kids during the school day, but also for the communities those schools serve after hours and on weekends. You know, across the country, we have hundreds of thousands of acres right embedded in communities that are literally locked up most of the time. They're unused spaces. Our organization has revitalized about 250 schoolyards across the country. And what we see is there's multiple benefits. One, the kids are always involved in creating these spaces, so they become spaces the kids want to use because they reflect what they want. So they want to be in them. And so we see kids and communities become much more engaged with the schools through these kind of collaborative planning processes, but also the schools, when they're redone, also can better serve to manage stormwater. The trees that are planted in schoolyards will help cool those spaces, which are disproportionately hot in the summer, particularly in a place like here in Denver, where we saw a record number of 90-degree plus days. If we can reimagine these spaces, unlock them for the communities that the schools serve, we can have a win-win situation of epic proportions.
Do you get any pushback from the schools themselves, on this idea of allowing the public into or onto the school grounds after hours?
We do. There are some concerns because if you improve something, you need to take care of it, and that costs money. And so that is a factor to be considered anywhere where this work is done. And that's the value of joint use agreements, is can you share that maintenance load with, say, the Parks and Rec department? Because from the Park and Rec side, if you're using schoolyards as parks and helping, as is the case here in Denver, where the goal is everyone within a 10-minute walk of a park, it's going to be a lot cheaper to reimagine the schoolyard than it is to buy a very expensive piece of property. So there can be ways to really be creative about sharing resources across the school district and the city, and we've seen that, and I think we could do that here, and we can do it in cities and towns across the country.
The less people have nature in their lives right now because of the pandemic, it's pulling back, creating a lot of tension. They really want to get outside. They want their kids outside. When the pandemic ends or fades, that slingshot is let loose. I don't know how long that will last, but I think there is a greater awareness now of how much we viscerally, in our bones, in our cells, need nature connection. The problem is, and I worry about this, as the economic problems continue because of COVID, will the programs that take kids and the rest of us outdoors, particularly those who take kids who wouldn't otherwise get out into nature, will those programs survive? The camps, all of those programs, the nature education, the nature centers, are they going to survive this? And it's one of the reasons I really urge people to support these programs now. Don't wait, because they may not exist when this is over. And your kids are going to want to get outside more, I hope, and you will too.
It has been such a joyous experience, and to take learning in a different direction. There's going to be some really great things that stay with us after this as we relook at how we're doing school.
I imagine that we will be coming up with ways to use these outdoor learning spaces for years to come.
There's a lot that's been revealed with this COVID pandemic, and I think one of those things that's been revealed is how important these outdoor learning environments are, and why and how we need them at schools, and we need them in our communities.
The outdoors are going to be more important to people's lives than ever post-pandemic.